small house sat quietly at the end of a dusty street in a town where everyone seemed to know each other's business. Inside, a young girl lived a life that was quiet, simple, and often overlooked. She was blind, and people in the town rarely thought much beyond that label. They saw her as someone who needed care, someone who was fragile, someone who would always be limited by what she could not see. But they did not know the strength that lived quietly inside her, the depth of feeling that could fill a room even without sight. Her day began like any other. The sun would rise, spilling light over the town, painting the walls and streets in warm colors that she could not see. Yet she had her own way of sensing the world. She could feel the sun's warmth on her skin, hear the birds' songs and the hum of morning activity outside her window, smell the faint scent of bread baking in the neighbor's oven. The world was not dark to her in the way others thought. It was full of textures, sounds, and feelings she had learned to notice with careful attention. From an early age, she had loved music. She had been drawn to the small, old piano in her house the moment she could reach its keys. It was not a grand instrument. The wood was scratched and faded. Some of the keys did not make perfect sounds, and the pedals were sticky from years of use. Yet to her it was magical. It was her companion, her teacher, and her escape. While the people around her focused on her blindness, she focused on the notes and the way they could carry her beyond. The walls of her small home, her hands had learned to memorize every key, every shape, and every subtle difference in sound. She could find her way across the piano in complete silence, guided only by touch and memory. When she played, it was as though the piano understood her better than anyone else ever could. She did not play for applause or recognition. She played to speak the words her voice could not always say, to tell stories her eyes could not see, and to feel free in a world that often seemed closed to her. Her family had noticed her talent, but they lived quietly and did not have the means to bring her to music teachers or competitions. They encouraged her, but they were cautious, worried that if she tried to show the world what she could do, she might face disappointment or ridicule. So she practiced in secret, her small fingers dancing across the keys for hours, learning melodies by ear and repeating them until they felt like a part of her soul. In the town, people whispered. They did not speak directly to her, but when she passed by, some would make comments under their breath. She will never, or it's hard to imagine, or what can she really do? Those words stung sometimes, but she had learned to ignore them. Instead, she listened more closely to the music in her own heart, letting it grow stronger than the voices around her. Her favorite time to play was late at night, when the house was quiet and the world outside had settled into darkness. It was then that she could explore the piano without interruption, letting her imagination soar. She would play songs she had heard from neighbors, from the radio, and from her memory of old music her parents had loved. Sometimes she improvised, letting her fingers move as they wished, discovering new melodies that came directly from her emotions. Each note felt like a word, each chord a sentence. And together, they told stories that words could never capture. Despite the quiet love she had for music, she often felt lonely. She longed for someone to hear her as she truly was, to understand that her blindness did not make her less capable, that her heart and mind were full of ideas and dreams just like anyone else. She dreamed of a day when she could show the world what she had built inside herself in secret, when people would not see her disability first, but her talent, her passion, and her courage. At school, things were not easy. While some teachers tried to help, many others did not know how to include her fully. Activities often felt like barriers rather than opportunities. Reading materials were hard to access, and social interactions could be awkward. Children can be cruel without realizing it, and she sometimes faced teasing or exclusion. But through it all, she found comfort in her piano. It was always there, waiting for her, never judging, never doubting. The music was patient, kind, and honest. Her parents did what they could. Her mother would sit nearby while she practiced, offering quiet encouragement. Her father would sometimes hum along, clapping softly when she played a song particularly well. They could see the joy in her, the way her face seemed to light up even without sight, and they felt proud. Still, they worried for her future. In their town, opportunities for someone with her abilities and her disability were rare. They hoped she could find a way to turn her talent into something more. But they did not know how. Despite the obstacles, she remained determined. She knew that her hands could create something beautiful, that her heart could reach people in ways that were unexpected. Every morning, she would wake with a quiet resolve to practice, to learn, and to improve. She did not focus on what others thought. She focused on what she could create. And slowly, day by day, she became more skilled, more confident, and more connected to her music than ever before. Neighbors would sometimes hear the music drifting from her home. At first, they were curious, then surprised, and occasionally skeptical. Can a blind girl really play like that? Some would ask. Others would stop and listen, caught off guard by the purity of the sound. They did not see the hours she spent learning, the mistakes she corrected, the persistence that drove her to sit at the piano every day. They only heard the music, but even that was enough to make them pause. Her talent was growing quietly, like a seed nurtured in secret soil. She did not play for attention, but if anyone had listened closely, they might have noticed something extraordinary in the way her music spoke to the heart. Each note carried a story, each song expressed emotion beyond words. The piano became her voice, her friend, and her way of connecting to a world that often overlooked her. Even though the days were often lonely, she was not sad. She had found a purpose that no one could take away. Music gave her freedom, independence, and hope. She imagined one day performing in front of an audience that would hear her, not see her blindness, and feel the beauty she could create. That dream kept her going, even when life felt difficult or the world seemed indifferent. Her life in the small house on the dusty street continued like this, a mixture of simplicity, struggle, and hidden brilliance. She moved through her days quietly, living in a world that often underestimated her, but always returning to her piano, where she was free, confident, and alive. Every practice session, every melody learned, and every song played brought her closer to the moment when the world would have to notice her talent. Though she could not see the faces of those who doubted her, she could feel their expectations, their low assumptions, and their underestimation. She turned that into motivation. She wanted to show them that her blindness was not a weakness, that her heart, mind, and hands could do more than they ever imagined. She wanted to prove, quietly but powerfully, that ability cannot be measured by sight, and that determination, passion, and love for what you do can overcome any obstacle. The old piano in her home had become her world. Its keys carried her dreams, her emotions, and her hopes for the future. It had scratches, worn-out pedals, and uneven notes, but to her, it was perfect. She learned patience, resilience, and creativity through it. It became her sanctuary, where she could explore every feeling, every idea, and every story within her. In a way, it was alive, responding to her touch and translating her soul into music that others could feel even if they could not see. And so, the young blind girl continued her quiet life. Unnoticed by many, but extraordinary in her own right, she practiced, dreamed, and waited. One day she believed the world would listen not to the labels people placed on her, but to the music that came straight from her heart. That day was still far away, but she did not lose hope. Every note she played was a step closer to showing everyone that she was more than anyone expected. She was capable, brilliant, and ready to shine in her own time, in the stillness of the evening. As the town settled and the last light faded, she sat at the piano again. Her fingers glided across the keys, filling the room with melodies that seemed to carry the weight of her entire life. Each chord was a statement. She was here. She could create. She could be heard, and one day, her music would change everything. And for the first time, in the quiet of her own world, she smiled, knowing that the journey had just begun. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. The young blind girl continued to live her quiet life, always returning to the piano that had become her world. What the townspeople did not know was how much time she spent practicing in secret, how much of her soul she poured into each note, and how deeply she was determined to become better. Every day brought new challenges. but she met them with patience and determination. She had begun to notice the small details in music that many people overlooked. The way a single note could change the feeling of a melody, how a pause could make the next sound even more powerful, and how different rhythms could tell a story without any words. She experimented with these ideas on the old piano, often staying up late into the night, her hands moving over the keys while her imagination carried her to places she had never been. At school, life was not always easy. Some children treated her differently because of her blindness. They would whisper behind her back or sometimes stare at her in ways that made her feel small. She learned to ignore the looks, the murmurs, and even the laughter, though it was not always easy. Music became her refuge, a place where she could feel strong and in control. When she played, she forgot about judgment, worry, and fear. The piano listened to her, understood her, and never made her feel less than anyone else. Her teachers were a mix of helpful and unsure. Some tried to include her, offering assistance or explaining lessons in ways she could access. Others seemed impatient or frustrated when she needed extra attention. She did not let it discourage her. She found ways to learn on her own, asking questions, listening carefully, and finding answers through practice and observation. Over time, she became confident in her ability to navigate the world. Not because others made it easy, but because she refused to let obstacles stop her at home. Her family watched her grow in skill and confidence. They were proud, but also protective. Her mother often reminded her to rest her hands and not overwork herself. Her father would sometimes sit nearby, listening quietly, letting the music fill the room, and marveling at the talent in their daughter. They believed in her more than anyone else, and their quiet support gave her the courage to keep pushing forward. Even when the world outside seemed indifferent. One afternoon, a neighbor stopped by unexpectedly. He had heard her playing the previous evening and had been curious. "I didn't know you played so well," he said. His words surprised her. Most people did not expect much from her, and he had been no different. She smiled quietly, not wanting to draw too much attention to herself. But inside, she felt a small spark of pride. It was the first time someone had noticed her talent without pity or doubt. Encouraged by small moments like that, she continued to practice with even more dedication. She began to teach herself new pieces of music, challenging her fingers and her mind. She listened to recordings, memorizing each note and rhythm by ear, playing them over and over until she could perform them flawlessly. Some pieces were complicated, requiring her to use both hands in ways that tested her coordination and memory. She struggled at first, often feeling frustrated, but she never gave up. Every mistake was a lesson. Every repetition brought improvement. Her piano became more than a tool for music. It became a teacher. She learned patience as she worked through difficult passages, persistence as she practiced for hours without giving up, and creativity as she experimented with melodies that had never been written before. She discovered that even without sight, she could express emotions, tell stories, and connect with people through her music. Each day she felt herself growing stronger, not just in skill, but in confidence and spirit. Outside, life continued as usual for the town. People went about their routines, often unaware of the young girl who lived quietly at the end of the street, shaping her talent in secret. She sometimes imagined what it would be like if someone discovered her ability, if she could play in front of others who were not expecting anything from her. The thought both excited and terrified her. She wondered if the world would understand, or if they would only see her blindness and dismiss her talent. Her family encouraged her quietly. They suggested small ways to share her music, like playing for close friends or family gatherings. She was hesitant at first, unsure if she was ready. But one day, her mother asked her to play during a small community gathering at their home. Reluctantly, she agreed. She sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and let her fingers move. The notes filled the room, clear and pure, carrying every feeling she had practiced for months. The people listening were amazed. They had never expected such beauty, such emotion, such skill. Some were silent, some smiled, some had tears in their eyes. That day changed something in her. She realized that music could reach people in ways words could not. She also realized that the world might notice her talent if she took small steps to share it. She did not seek fame or attention, but she wanted to show that she was capable, that her abilities were real, and that her passion was powerful. After that performance, she felt a quiet confidence she had never felt before. She knew that one day she could reach an even larger audience, and she began to dream of the possibilities. The months that followed were filled with practice, learning, and small performances. She became more confident in her ability to share her music, even in front of people she did not know well. Each time she played, she grew more comfortable, more expressive, and more assured. Music was no longer just a private escape. It was a way to connect, to communicate, and to show the world who she truly was. Her piano continued to teach her lessons beyond music. She learned discipline by practicing every day, focus by memorizing complex pieces, and courage by performing in front of others. She learned that talent alone was not enough. It required hard work, dedication, and the willingness to face fear. And she learned that even a small audience could have a big impact. The smiles, the tears, the applause, and the quiet nods of appreciation reminded her that what she was doing mattered, despite her growing confidence. She still faced challenges. Some people in town doubted her, treating her with pity or skepticism. They did not understand how a blind girl could play with such skill. Sometimes their words hurt, but she learned to use them as fuel rather than a barrier. She reminded herself that their opinions did not define her. Her talent, her passion, and her hard work were what mattered most. One evening, after a long day of practice, she sat quietly at the piano, letting her fingers move freely over the keys. She played a melody she had created herself, a song full of hope, struggle, and joy. Each note felt like a story, and as she played, she imagined the people who might one day hear it. She imagined their reactions, their smiles, their surprise, and in that moment, she felt a deep sense of purpose. She knew that her music could touch hearts, that her piano could change lives, and that she had something unique to offer the world. Her family noticed the change in her. They saw her growing confidence, her determination, and her joy in creating music. They encouraged her to continue even when opportunities seemed far away. They believed in her dreams, and their belief gave her strength. Slowly, she began to see herself not just as a blind girl, but as a musician, an artist, and someone capable of extraordinary things. The town remained quiet and unchanged, but within the walls of her home, a transformation was taking place. A young girl who had been underestimated by everyone around her was growing into someone who would one day surprise the world. Her piano was her guide, her teacher, and her friend. Each day, it taught her more about music, life, and herself. And each day, she became more ready for the moment when her talent would no longer be hidden. She continued to practice diligently, pushing herself to learn more difficult pieces and to perfect her skills. She experimented with new styles, from classical melodies to improvisation. Discovering the ways her music could express different emotions, she noticed how even small changes in tempo or rhythm could completely alter the feeling of a piece. Her understanding of music deepened, and with it, her connection to the world around her. Despite the challenges she faced, she never lost hope. She knew that her abilities were real, and she trusted that one day they would be recognized. She learned patience, resilience, and the value of persistence. Every mistake became a lesson. Every small success became motivation. And every hour spent at the piano brought her closer to realizing her dreams. The blind girl's journey was quiet but powerful. She lived in a world that often underestimated her, but she refused to let that define her. She practiced, learned, and dreamed with a determination that could not be broken. And as the days passed, she grew stronger, more confident, and more ready for the moment when her music would finally be heard by those who could not imagine the talent that had been hiding in plain sight all along. She had begun to understand that her blindness was not a limitation, but a part of who she was. Shaping her sensitivity to sound, emotion, and expression, her music carried her feelings in a way that sight could never do. And in the quiet of her small house, with her hands on the keys and her heart full of hope. She played with a passion and a skill that would one day change everything. The small town continued its quiet rhythm, unaware that something extraordinary was about to happen. The young blind girl had spent years hidden away, perfecting her music, building her confidence, and dreaming of the day she might play in front of others. That day arrived sooner than she expected, though not in the way she imagined. A community event was planned in the town hall, a gathering where people from nearby areas would come together. It was supposed to be a day of celebration, laughter, and simple entertainment. The organizers had scheduled a performer, someone who was known and trusted, to play the piano for the guests. The young blind girl had heard whispers about the event. She had thought about attending quietly, perhaps listening from the back, enjoying the music like everyone else. She never expected to be part of it. The day of the event arrived with excitement and activity. People bustled into the hall, chatting and laughing. The tables were set, decorations hung, and the piano sat quietly in the corner, its polished wood shining under the lights. The young girl arrived with her family, quietly guided by her mother. She had worn her favorite dress, one that made her feel confident and comfortable. Her heart raced as she listened to the sounds of people gathering, feeling both excitement and nervousness swirl inside her. As the crowd settled, a sudden announcement echoed through the hall. The scheduled performer had been delayed and could not make it on time. There was a murmur of concern among the organizers. They needed someone to fill the gap, to play for even a few minutes while they tried to adjust the program. Her mother, seeing an opportunity, gently suggested that she could play. The girl froze, unsure. Her hands trembled slightly, and doubt crept into her mind. She had never played in front of such a large group before, and the thought terrified her. Her father placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You can do this," he said quietly. "You have practiced for years. You are ready." His words gave her a small spark of courage. She took a deep breath, feeling the air fill her lungs, and nodded. Slowly, she made her way to the piano, guided by her mother's hand. Every step felt heavy. Every sound from the crowd a reminder that she was about to face something entirely new. When she reached the piano, she paused. Her hands hovered above the keys, uncertain. The murmurs of the crowd filled the room, some curious, some skeptical. She could sense their doubt, their expectation that she might fail. She felt the weight of their eyes, even though she could not see them. For a moment, fear threatened to take over, but she remembered all the hours she had spent practicing. The countless nights alone with the piano, the melodies that had carried her through loneliness and doubt. She let that thought anchor her. Slowly, her fingers touched the keys. The first note sounded soft and tentative. It was a small sound, but it marked the beginning of something extraordinary. She closed her eyes and let her memory guide her. Each note she played came from her heart, each chord carrying emotion, depth, and a story. She played a melody she had practiced countless times, but this time it felt different. It was alive. It was reaching out to the people around her, speaking in a language beyond words at first. The audience was quiet, unsure what to expect. Some leaned back, folding their arms, watching skeptically. Others leaned forward, curious, trying to hear clearly. Slowly, the music began to capture their attention. The hesitant beginning gave way to confidence as the young girl's fingers moved gracefully across the keys. The melody grew richer, more expressive, filling the room with emotion. Every note seemed to speak directly to the hearts of those listening. Bypassing their judgments and expectations, she played with a mixture of technical skill and deep feeling. Her hands moved effortlessly, guided by memory and intuition. The music told a story of struggle, hope, and courage. She imagined the people she wanted to reach, the ones who had doubted her, the ones who had never expected anything from her. She wanted them to hear her truth, to feel her strength, and to understand that her blindness did not define her. The room began to change. The murmurs of skepticism faded, replaced by silence, awe, and wonder. People closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Some wiped tears from their cheeks, moved by the unexpected beauty that came from someone they had underestimated. The young girl did not notice their reactions. She was lost in the music, fully present in every note, chord, and pause. The piano had become a bridge between her world and theirs, a way for her to communicate what words could not. As she continued to play, she experimented with subtle variations in tempo and rhythm, adding her own emotions to the melody. She had learned to listen deeply, to feel the vibrations of the piano, and to translate her feelings into sound. Each note became more confident, more powerful, and more expressive. She could feel the energy in the room shift, the way the audience's attention had turned fully toward her. It was a strange sensation, being noticed not for her blindness, for her talent, her dedication, and her heart. Her family watched with pride, their hearts swelling. They could sense that this moment was more than just a performance. It was a turning point. The young girl, once overlooked and underestimated, was showing the world who she truly was. Every note, every pause, every chord was a statement of resilience, courage, and artistry. They felt tears in their eyes, knowing that the music had captured something special, something that could not be measured by sight alone. The performance continued, growing in intensity and emotion. She played pieces she had practiced for months, mixing them seamlessly with improvisations that came directly from her heart. The audience could feel the story unfolding through the music. They were transported from the small town hall to a world of emotion and beauty, led by the hands of someone they had never imagined could create such magic. As the final notes echoed through the room, profound silence filled the air. People were stunned, unable to immediately react. Some stared at the piano, trying to understand how someone so young and blind could create such a powerful performance. Others looked at each other, sharing expressions of amazement and disbelief. The young girl sat quietly, her hands resting on the keys, unsure if she had done enough, unaware of the impact she had just made. Then, slowly, the applause began. At first, it was soft, hesitant, but it grew louder and stronger, filling the hall with appreciation and admiration. People were on their feet, clapping, cheering, and some even wiping tears from their eyes. The young girl felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. She had done it. She had shared her music with the world, and they had listened, truly listened. For the first time, her mother stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You were amazing," she whispered. Her father nodded, tears in his eyes. "I always knew you could do this." The young girl smiled, overwhelmed by the experience. She realized that all the practice, all the doubt, all the hours of solitude had led to this moment. She had faced her fears, stepped into the unknown, and shown the world her talent. In the days that followed, people talked about the performance. The young girl became a quiet sensation in the town. People who had once doubted her now spoke with respect and admiration. They asked her to play at gatherings, praised her skill, and expressed surprise at the depth of her music. The experience had changed not only how they saw her, but how they understood talent, ability, and courage. For the young girl, the performance was more than recognition. It was proof to herself that she could overcome fear, share her gift, and connect with others in ways she had never imagined. She realized that the world would sometimes underestimate her, but that would never define what she could achieve. Her music had given her a voice, a presence, and a way to touch lives that sight alone could never measure. The piano, worn and old, had been her guide through it all. It had listened to her struggles, carried her dreams, and amplified her courage. Every key, every note, every chord had been a step toward this moment. And as she sat quietly afterward, letting the applause fade and feeling the vibrations of the final notes linger, she knew that this was only the beginning. There were more songs to play, more hearts to reach, and more stories to tell through her music. Her journey had taken a new turn. No longer hidden in the quiet of her home, she had stepped into the light, even if she could not see it herself. She had shown that talent and determination could overcome doubt, that courage could turn fear into strength, and that music could speak louder than words. And as she returned home that evening, exhausted but fulfilled, she could already feel the spark of the next performance, the next audience, the next moment when her piano would change everything once again, after that first unforgettable performance. Life for the young blind girl changed in ways she could hardly imagine. The small community that had once overlooked her now watched with quiet admiration. People spoke of her talent in whispers at first, then more openly, as if they could not believe what they had witnessed. But the girl herself remained humble and focused. She knew that one performance did not define her, and she continued to spend long hours at the piano, practicing and exploring her music. Each day, she approached the piano with renewed determination. She was no longer playing in secret, but she still played for herself first, making sure that every note, every chord, and every melody carried her emotions and her soul. She had discovered the power of her music, but she also knew that it was fragile. The music needed care, attention, and honesty. It was a living thing, and she nurtured it with every practice session. Word of her talent spread beyond the town. Visitors began to ask if she could play for small gatherings or local events. Some came out of curiosity, others with genuine interest. The girl felt nervous each time, but she had learned to channel that fear into her performance. She reminded herself that she had already faced the greatest challenge, stepping onto the stage for the first time, and that the rest was simply sharing what she loved. Her first few performances outside her home were met with astonishment. People who had doubted her, who had whispered that a blind girl could never achieve much, were forced to see the truth. They listened in silence as her hands danced across the keys, producing melodies that were both technically precise and deeply emotional. The music seemed to flow naturally from her, as if it had always been a part of her and only needed the piano to give it form. It was not just skill that impressed people. It was the emotion behind the music. The girl played with a depth of feeling that spoke to experiences everyone could relate to: hope, struggle, joy, loss, and resilience. Even without understanding her life story, the audience could sense the journey behind every note. Some listeners wept quietly, others held their hands to their hearts, and many simply sat in awe. She had found a way to reach people in a manner that transcended ordinary performance, and it left a lasting impression. Despite the growing attention, she remained grounded. Her family continued to support her quietly, never pushing her beyond what she was ready for. Her mother helped guide her through new performances, offering gentle advice and encouragement. Her father provided quiet confidence, reminding her that her talent was real and that it came from her heart, not just her training. Together, they created a stable foundation that allowed her to grow without feeling pressured or overwhelmed. She also began to notice a change within herself. Performing in front of others had given her confidence she had never experienced before. The fear that once seemed so heavy no longer held the same power. She could focus entirely on the music, letting the audience feel what she felt, instead of worrying about their judgment. This freedom allowed her to experiment more with her music, adding improvisation and personal touches that made each performance unique. Her dedication to the piano did not go unnoticed. Teachers and local musicians began to recognize her talent. Some offered guidance, lessons, or opportunities to perform in larger venues. She approached each offer carefully, never rushing, always making sure that she felt ready. She wanted her music to remain authentic, to reflect her own voice rather than being molded solely by outside influence. The balance between opportunity and authenticity became an important lesson in her journey. One afternoon, a well-known musician from a nearby city visited the town. They had heard about the blind girl's talent and wanted to meet her. When they arrived, the room was filled with anticipation. The musician asked if she could play for them, and the girl felt the familiar rush of nerves. But this time, she smiled, took a deep breath, and let her fingers find the keys. The musician listened intently, nodding along with the music, occasionally leaning closer to catch subtleties in rhythm and tone. When the performance ended, they applauded enthusiastically. "You have something rare," they said. "Your music speaks in a way very few can achieve. You have to share it with more people." That encounter sparked new ideas in the girl's mind. She realized that her music had the potential to reach beyond her town, beyond the familiar faces she had known all her life. She imagined audiences in other towns, larger stages, and more people hearing her story through the piano. The thought excited her, but she also felt the weight of responsibility. She wanted to ensure that every performance remained true to herself. that she never lost the honesty and emotion that made her music special. Meanwhile, her life at home continued with its quiet rhythms. She still helped with daily chores, spent time with her family, and walked through the town with careful steps. The world had changed around her, but she had not. She remained humble, kind, and focused, qualities that her audience often remarked upon after hearing her play. People noticed that her talent was accompanied by sincerity and grace, which made the music even more powerful. At school, things shifted as well. Some students who had once ignored or teased her began to approach her with respect and curiosity. They asked questions about her music, listened to her play, and slowly began to see her not as someone limited by blindness, but as a person with extraordinary talent. While she did not seek approval, she felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that her hard work and dedication were visible to others in ways they had not expected. Her growing recognition brought new experiences. She began to perform at community events, charity gatherings, and small concerts. Each time, she felt the familiar flutter of nervousness, but she had learned to transform it into energy that enriched her performance. She discovered that the audience's anticipation, their curiosity, and even their doubt could be powerful motivators. She learned to listen to the energy in the room, to adapt, and to allow the music to guide both her and the listeners. Through these experiences, she also developed a deeper understanding of herself. She realized that her blindness, while challenging, had shaped her sensitivity to sound, rhythm, and emotion. She felt music in ways that others could not. She noticed the subtle vibrations of the piano, the changes in tone, the nuances that might go unnoticed by sighted performers. This awareness gave her a unique perspective and allowed her to bring depth and authenticity to every performance. Her family continued to be her anchor. They reminded her to rest when necessary, to stay true to herself, and to enjoy the journey rather than focusing solely on recognition or success. Their support provided stability and reassurance, helping her navigate the growing attention and opportunities. With them by her side, she felt confident in taking steps she might not have dared to consider alone. As her music reached more people, the young girl began to realize the impact she could have beyond mere performance. She noticed the way listeners reacted. Some found comfort, some found inspiration, and some discovered emotions they had not felt in years. Her music became more than sound. It became a bridge between hearts, a source of healing, and a way for people to connect with something deeper within themselves. She understood that her talent is not only a gift to herself, but also to the world. The young girl's life had transformed from quiet practice in her home to performances that touched entire communities. She had begun to build a reputation for her unique ability, but she never let it change who she was. Her humility, dedication, and focus on authenticity remained at the core of everything she did. Every note she played was a reflection of her heart, every chord a story, and every melody a piece of her soul. One evening, after returning from a local concert, she sat at her piano in the quiet of her room. She let her fingers wander across the keys, not following a written piece, but allowing her emotions to guide the music. In that moment, she reflected on how far she had come from playing in secret at home to performing for audiences who were genuinely moved by her talent. She felt gratitude for her family, for the piano that had been her companion, and for the inner strength that had carried her through years of doubt and quiet. Preparation. She also thought about the future. She knew there would be challenges ahead, bigger audiences, higher expectations, and new opportunities that might test her resolve, but she felt ready. She had discovered not only her talent, but also her courage, her resilience, and her ability to share something meaningful with others. She understood that her journey was ongoing, that each performance was another step toward realizing her full potential. Through it all, the young girl remained deeply connected to her music. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was an extension of herself, a way to communicate without words, and a source of joy and purpose. She had learned that music could transcend limitations, overcome doubt, and touch the hearts of people in ways nothing else could. And she had begun to understand that her blindness, far from being a barrier, had given her a sensitivity and depth that made her music extraordinary. Her story was no longer just about a blind girl playing the piano. It was about determination, courage, and the power of pursuing one's passion. It was about showing the world that obstacles could be transformed into strengths, that hidden talent could flourish when nurtured with love and dedication, and that the human spirit could shine even in the face of doubt as the days passed. The young girl continued to grow as a musician and as a person. Her music reached more hearts, her confidence strengthened, and her connection to the world deepened. She had learned that success was not only about recognition, but about the joy of creating, the courage to share, and the ability to inspire others simply by being true to oneself. The piano remained at the center of her life, a constant companion that had guided her through the quiet struggles, the secret practice sessions, and the first moments of public recognition. And with each note she played, she prepared for the moments yet to come, knowing that one day her music would reach even further, touch more hearts, and continue to change lives in ways she could only begin to imagine. The young girl had come a long way from the quiet days she spent at home, practicing on the old piano. Every hour she had spent alone, every note she had learned, and every moment she had doubted herself had led to this point. The town now knew her talent, but she felt that her music could reach even further, touch more hearts, and change more lives than she had ever imagined. She was ready for the next step, though she did not yet know exactly what it would be. A letter arrived one morning, neatly folded and addressed to her family. It was from a music teacher in a nearby city, someone with experience in performance and public events. The letter invited her to play at a charity concert that would gather people from all over the region. The event promised a larger audience than she had ever faced, including musicians, music enthusiasts, and people in positions to recognize real talent. Her heart raced as she read the invitation. The idea of performing on such a stage both excited and frightened her. Her parents encouraged her gently. "You have the talent and the courage," her father said. "You've shown everyone in the town what you can do. Now, it's time to show the world." Her mother nodded, smiling softly. "We'll be with you every step of the way. You are ready." The young girl took a deep breath and agreed. She knew it would be a challenge, but she felt prepared. Years of practice, determination, and quiet dedication had built her into a musician who could handle it. The days leading up to the performance were filled with preparation. She practiced for hours, choosing the pieces she wanted to play, experimenting with tempo, and perfecting the melodies she had created. She wanted every note to carry meaning, every chord to express emotion, and every pause to speak volumes. The piano had been her teacher, guide, and friend for years, and now it would be her partner in a moment that could change her life forever. When the day of the concert arrived, the girl felt the familiar flutter of nerves in her stomach. The hall was large and filled with people she had never seen before. The lights were brighter than anything she was used to, and the hum of the crowd was louder than anything in her small town. Yet, she reminded herself of the countless hours she had spent practicing, the melodies she knew by heart, and the emotions she wanted to share. She was not performing to impress. She was performing to express, and that thought steadied her. Her family guided her to the stage. The piano sat under a soft spotlight, inviting her to take her place. She touched the keys gently, feeling their familiar texture, and let her fingers rest as she listened to the audience settle. There were whispers and curious murmurs, but she focused on the music within her, the melodies that had grown from years of dedication and love. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to sink into the sound, letting it guide her hands and heart. The first note she played was soft, deliberate, and full of emotion. The audience quieted immediately, sensing something extraordinary. She moved through the melody with confidence, letting her feelings flow freely into the music. Every note was precise, yet filled with vulnerability and passion. The audience was captivated, drawn into a world they had never expected from a young blind girl. It was as if the piano itself were speaking, telling stories that words could never convey. As she continued to play, her music became more powerful. She mixed pieces she had learned with her own creations, improvising in ways that surprised even herself. The audience leaned forward, listening intently, some with tears in their eyes, others with wide smiles. Her music was more than skill. It was honesty, courage, and emotion expressed in sound. Each note carried a piece of her life, her struggles, her hope, and her triumphs.